I'm a graduate student at the University of Florida. My overall study is on juvenile tarpon habitat restoration. However, due to timelines of the restoration, for my master's thesis, I'm just looking at observations of the juvenile tarpon population in its nursery habitat, which is also serves as the baseline for the pre-restoration monitoring. So, a little life history of tarpon. Tarpon actually go offshore to spawn 100 miles offshore in the Gulf through the summers near the full and Edmunds in a broadcast pond, which means they just release the sperm and egg into the open water, and that's the last of their parenting. So this is what a larval tarpon looks like. It's in the state for about 3 to 4 weeks, and they make their way from 100 miles offshore into these back-bay estuaries where they become they then goes into the juvenile tarpon, which is the miniature of an adult tarpon. So juvenile tarpon should occur, well, I guess what we'll call the nursery habitats, for about 2 years. That's how long they should stay here. They really, really prefer places with low oxygen, low DO, because they have an occupied swim bladder, so that way they can take oxygen from the air, they can gulp at the surface, which is a successful tool for them, which not all other species have. So this is my study, which Stephanie talked a little bit about. The Wildfire Reserve is off of the state road near Rotunda. It's owned by the Conservancy, and it used to be an 8-acre golf course. Now it's only used for conservation purposes, and there's a series of trails that are utilized sometimes by the mostly by the Conservancy members. So this will be where the restoration will take place. So in order to gauge if the restoration is successful, we're monitoring pre- and post-restoration to look at these certain parameters, which are growth rate, survival, abundance, movement within the system, and movement out of the system. Once a month, myself and some great volunteers come out to Wildfire Reserve, and we use a 600-foot center bag sitting net in 3 different study ponds. And one study pond that we're looking at now is a little bit larger than that, so we deploy it twice there. So we're a total of 4 sets. We use a 14-foot jump boat, and then just manpower to the shore to actually make the fish in the net. So each fish, if it's under a certain size, we'll talk about that in a second, is been clipped for genetic purposes. So with tarpon, which is unique to other fish species, is that you can identify it using DNA to the fish. So what I do is send these spin clips up to artificial wildlife researchers to do is say Pete, and they can tell me this is a great method for market capture. Also, the fish is 190 millimeter standard length, which is about 7.5 inches. I can replace it with a pit tag. These are great. Most of you probably use them in front of them. They don't have a battery, so they'll last the life of the fish. And this, we immediately know when we recapture a fish, because we can actually bond the fish. So we have 2 methods of recapture. One is physical recapture. So we replace it with a tag, release it, catch it again, scan it, as a tag in it. So therefore we don't need the fin clip. Now, secondary to the physical recapture, we have kind of a passive antenna. Luckily at Wildfire, there's only one entrance and access to the system. So it exerts kind of a choke point that I can set up this antenna. Each month they go down with the data. It'll tell me the unique ID number, just like a microchip in a pet. Also, it'll tell me the date and the time that the fish was at this antenna. So we're getting into my results. These are the number of fish that are captured by the lines, if you can see them. Well, just by the end of the beginning of the year. And it looks like they're somewhat stable. Maybe we're getting less fish as opposed to one. Could just be the core recruitment there. Could also be due to they're rising up to our sampling strategies, and then when we put the boat in the water, so we'll be able to tell as sampling continues. Okay, so to date I've caught over 1,000 juvenile tarpon in Wildfire Reserve. Of those, 230 were large enough to be pit tagged. Since I've been off, so the rest of the other 75% were fin clips. I have not yet received that data back or it could mean that they're preferring a single block. So with the antenna, we've seen that 59 of those fish have actually made it out. They've traveled through this culvert system underneath the road, the city road, and out to the antenna, which is great. We want to see high numbers. If these fish are moving out of the system once they get to a certain size to contribute to a larger population, then they're no ecological value to us. They just get stuck back there. Then they don't contribute to the larger adult population. Otherwise, I'd like to thank my donors, Louis, Service People, Fish Shark Trust, and University of Florida. Studying might be possible. Also, Stephanie talked a little bit about the finger creeks at Coral Creek, and I'll actually be picking up this site. I intend to graduate from the University of Florida with a master's in August, and also in August. So, everyone mentions Aaron Adams, that's also me. Aaron sent us to the East Coast. I'm still on their liaison over here. So, we'll be doing is looking at these 6 study creeks, and I'll also be tagging the fish in there and see how they use this habitat. What they intend to do is to create different habitats within these strands that are relatively close together, so we can see if they're preferring habitat if they're moving around inside these little creeks. Okay. The time is to answer questions, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Questions?
Hi there. I'm curious, how do you physically insert the tag into the fish?
So I actually have a 15-blade scalpel, if you've seen any medical shows. And there's an abdominal cavity that, so I can find it. So I don't have to embed it in muscle, because a lot of times they'll reject that. So there's actually an empty cavity that I can put it in there. I sample it as little as 3 weeks later. We captured a fish and you couldn't even tell I wanted it. And yeah, it grows back really quickly. Same with the clips. You can put some fish, put them in a tank, and it took about 2 weeks. So visually, when we're recapturing the fish, you can't tell.
In looking at your graph, when you were showing the numbers that you initially logged and then it decreased over time,
Right?
do you have any idea how much of that reduction is due to predation?
So one of the other things I'm looking at is survival, but I did not do that on the just pit tag fish. I thought the sample size was a little too small. I wanted to wait until I got my entire 1,000 sample size in order to do that. So at this point, no, I don't have any data.
Yeah, because I was just curious if the tarpon themselves were getting to a size where now they're becoming interesting to the predators.
Absolutely. A lot of predators they have there, maybe alligators, we really haven't seen any. A lot is wading birds. The only other species that we have found there are mullet as well as snook. But every time we caught snook, they're the exact same size class as the tarpon, so we don't think it's predator-prey relationship. Another thing that I'm interested in seeing in the summers is if these larvae are coming in and the larger sizes aren't leaving in the first year class, if there's a predator-prey cannibalism situation. Fortunately, that's not part of my wide study at this point, so I'm not, they kind of said, okay, we'll look at that later. Another thing, though, is you can see in May, June, and July how there's a serious decline. A lot of it, I think, is my beer selectivity. So at this, right now, the smallest tarpon that I've been able to get is about 5 inches. So if they're coming in and they're at 3 and 4 inches, even though they're north, it's saying they can actually swim through the mesh in my net.
Right.
So short answer to your question of survival, no.
Thank you.
But yeah, that would be part of it.
Thank you for your patience, John.
I'm really excited about this low oxygen habitat. It seems to be just so very important. And is there, are you, when you say it's hypoxic or anoxic, it's like below 2 milligrams per liter?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, especially on the bottoms. I think I fired a YSI, which I should have been doing the whole time, but in October. So over 6 months, what it is the surface and the bottom at all 3 of the study months before we pull net. And typically on the bottom, it is somewhat 0, and then definitely between 1 and 4 at the surface. I mean, it's really low.
As a habitat type, is there an initiative to study and find other locations that have similar value? How well known is this? It's new to me, and so I'm wondering, is anybody going out and looking around South Florida saying, hey, this is where tarpon live?
So I should have elaborated on this slide. There was actually a study that was done at FIT in Melbourne. And what they did is they went around to all these juvenile tarpon sites and built a characteristic list of what made a good site. And DO is on there. They really need a low salt oxygen, which also comes from the calm backwaters, so we don't have that wave wind action. Also, what I'm doing with Aaron Adams is people are calling us up and saying, hey, there's juvenile tarpon here. And right now we're mapping different sites, specifically within Southwest Florida, because that's where I'm based out of. And we're actually creating these different sites where juvenile tarpon are, but it's kind of how do you want to attack it? Do you find low DO places or do you find tarpon places? So right now it's easier to find the tarpon places. So that's how we're looking at it, and then eventually those will become safe sites. What we really want to glean from the restoration is what was successful and what wasn't. So that way we can replicate that in other places, specifically in Southwest Florida, which is why Coral Creek habitat would be great, because we can look at different restoration approaches and see which one they prefer.
But are these places protected when you say in general?
No, other than most people can't easily access them. Definitely not, because there's people going back there to fish one.
Yeah, I asked a fish out here a year or so ago. I said, where do you think they are in Sarasota County? And he said, in the mosquito ditches. Which over the years we've said, well, let's fill in these mosquito ditches and make them better. And I just wonder if we're working against the current thinking.
Yeah, so I actually live, as an example, I live in South Florida on the east of Bristol Road, so between Bristol Road and Backyard Club. And I have tarpon in ponds that are probably 25 pounds. And what happens is probably when they were in the larval stage, there was a high water event that washed them up and over Bristol Road. And basically, it's the strategy is to get as far back as they can. So they're keep traveling until they hit land. That's why they're finding these creeks. But now, there's no way for those tarpons to get back out. So I understand what you're saying about mosquito ditches, but then once they dry up, like I said before, there's no ecological use to the greater population. So it's hit or miss with that. They have no way, they want us to live there for about 2 years, which isn't feasible anyway. So if they're not living, then they're basically ecologically dead to the greater population.
Nice.
We have time for one more?
Tarpon are one of the longest species in geologic time, one of the earliest forms. And they've been utilized in these type of habitats based on records of different people. Yeah, it was a long time, well before any mosquito ditches were made in the 60s or 70s. And we were finding them in our salt marsh study, back up in these same type of habitats in these areas, the ponds around the east wall of Charlotte Harbor. Do you think that there's a justification to maintain mosquito ditches just for this one species when we take a look at the fact that they were pretty well able to maintain their populations without mosquito ditches for millions of years?
So I understand what you're saying about maintaining populations because there are obviously a lot of experience. I think our goal is to somewhat take the mosquito ditch out of the equation. If we can take these altered habitats like wildfire preserve, make them better, or optimal habitat for these tarpon, then our survival will increase, and therefore we may not need to maintain those mosquito ditches. So possibly no, it just depends on how well the restoration practices will work. If we can basically make up for the loss of those elements in the ditches.
Thank you.
I want to thank Joellen for the hard work she's done over the last 18 months, and we went through a lot of permutations on improving our strategic techniques and what we're doing. And one of the things, well, I'm a big Conservancy, and one of the things we now realize is that we established the Tarpon Committee, and Dr. do that all along the east wall area. And we're looking at specific areas that Dr. Adams has already identified as being fruitful for those efforts. And we also have an area that we just acquired that happens to be out on one of the very islands. It's also in the Tarpon habitat and produces plague. So we're just sort of, you might say, looking at the possibilities of making this a better operation. But the end goal is being taking the disappearing habitat and hoping, number one, it doesn't get disappeared for various reasons that we can't control, and the county could perhaps control, and the state could perhaps help us do it. But also to partner so that we can have science that we know works and keep taking that and transferring to other places to make it successful. If we can find success in restoration of wildlife, we think we can find success in restoration of places. I think that's something she's sort of trying to say in which way. And Joelle, it's fortunate because the whole idea of this project was to do free sampling before the restoration that Stephanie's doing with SWIFT money goes on. And in the process of restoring the wetland, we don't want to set up the tarpon either. So it's a delicate balance. And one of the things we did find out, if you look at the aerial maps that are out there on display, the 50s wetlands, the original creek that we're using as part of Lemon Creek, got smushed down a little bit by the developer to improve his golf course. So we're going to try to unsmush it and make it more productive for the tarpons. And theoretically, we really don't know. So. But I'm not a scientist. That's my theory. Okay.
Last question.
Okay, you're still Kliment. So, John, since you're the one that's the most familiar with wildflower, what are some of the questions that you've seen from that study that you think you want to answer yourself when you go up to Coral Creek into those, because it's such an opportunity to do that little science experiment there. So what is it, your own personal best question that you're interested in?
Yeah, so I think the Coral Creek site will be great because we have some room to manipulate the site. Basically, even though we're looking at tarpon and they're a great species, we're overall looking at nursery habitats and how certain fish species are using the habitats. So we don't really know what they like. Right now, at wildflower, we know that they're there. And then we'll do some restoration and see if they're still there and if they are better species. But at Coral Creek, we can do different restoration, I guess, manipulations to those finger creeks and see which one works better, which one's more optimal, which one they like more.
One more, last one, quick. Quick.
So I remember many years ago, this Deerfield conversation, someone said that tarpon in the backwater areas of the low oxygen have potential predators at early critical stages. Is that got any support, or is that just...
Yes, I'd absolutely agree with that. Because they have this ability to go up the air, that's their best strategy for survival, especially at smaller sizes. So I think that's the number one factor of what they're looking for when they are settling into these nursery habitats is a low DL, and that equates to 0 to no predation for them other than the birds.